Okay, welcome everyone to the Finance Committee meeting of July 12th, 2021. This evening we've got acceptance of minutes, reserve fund transfers and line item transfers, a 6:15 discussion with Attorney Bobrowski, then wage and personnel discussions, correspondence, public participation, and as may arise. I honestly didn't see minutes, but that might be me. Sorry, Linda. Did minutes go out?
I hope so. Let me double check it on.
Yeah, I got them.
I think it was connected all in the same email.
I see. Then,
Yep.
I confess I haven't read them. I think we have a quorum though to take a vote though. So shall I propose can I ask for a motion to accept the minutes?
So moved.
621 and 628.
So moved.
Second.
Thanks, folks. Roll call vote. Mike O'Brien?
In favor. Yep.
Mike?
Tom, just before you start that,
Yes.
officially you need to say who's here.
I'm sorry. I didn't realize we were taking attendance. Sorry, guys. My second meeting. I'm used to this. So I should yes. Just Finance Committee members.
Hi, everyone.
So,
Michael Brown.
Mike O'Brien, let's see, Cheryl
Yes.
is here, Drew is here.
Yep.
Mike is here.
Yep.
John,
One, two,
John, and myself, Tom Connolly.
Right.
I think that covers, oh, there's John. John, you're on mute.
won't come up.
Okay, we good to go, Charlie?
Yeah, we'll put it on the record. Obviously, it's apparent that we're recording this meeting. So aware of that. Thanks.
Okay. So get the protocols down here. Okay, so we're initiating a roll call vote on acceptance of minutes from June 21, June 28th. Cheryl made the motion, Mike seconded it. So let me take a roll call vote here. So Mike O'Brien.
Yes, in favor.
Aye. Mike,
Yes.
Cheryl,
Yes.
Drew,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
and I will abstain as I didn't review them carefully enough, but I think motion carries. Thank you all. So Sandy, next item on the agenda was line item transfers or reserve fund transfers. Do we have any to review this week?
Lots.
We do. I think, Linda, did you send them out to them?
Yep.
Yeah. We do have several,
I can.
and hopefully this will be it. Linda, do you want to go through them or?
Sure.
Yes,
I can if
Linda,
Tom
could you go
wants me
through it
to.
for us?
Okay, so the first one I have is that you should have gotten was in the amount of $73.51 from the Selectmen's expense account to the Selectmen's clerical account. Also on that same one is the amount of $19.62 from the accountant's expense to the accountant's clerical. The employees work more hours at the beginning of the week and then shorter hours on Friday. And since the budgets are based on 5 equal days, the accounts were budgeted very, very tightly last year. So we put everything super tight. So they actually came up 3 days short per time. And these are the remaining balances that they need to fill out the payments for the last fiscal year. So it's $73.51 from Selectman expense to Selectman clerical and $19.62 from accountant expense to accountant clerical.
Any questions or discussion from the group?
No.
Okay, could I get a motion to pass the line item transfers as Linda has described them?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, take a roll call vote. Cheryl,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Michael Bennett,
Yes.
Mike O'Brien,
Yes.
Drew,
Yes.
and myself, Tom Connolly, is a yes. So the motion carries. Thank you all.
You're welcome. Okay, the next one is from the elementary school, and they're asking to please transfer the amount of $28,000 from the elementary school costs account to the special needs transportation. They're saying that there's extra money in the elementary school costs because there were reduced transportation costs while they were in the hybrid school mode, and they had no homeless transportation costs during the year. However, the reason for the projected deficit in special needs transportation was the distancing required by additional vehicles, and there were also newer routes, as well as additions and unexpected move-ins. So it's $28,000 from the Halifax elementary school costs to the special needs transportation.
Seems eminently logical. Any questions or discussion for Linda? Sandy?
Good.
So could I get a motion to transfer $28,000 from the cost account to the special needs transportation account?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. A roll call vote then. Cheryl?
Yes.
John?
I'm going to abstain.
Okay. Michael Bennett?
Yes.
Michael O'Brien?
Yes.
Drew?
Yes.
And myself, Tom Connolly, is a yes. I believe the motion carries 5 to 1.
Yeah, the next one is for $378.52. It's from data processing to telephone communications. There's extra money left in the data processing in the expense account, it said, and it's to cover expenses that were exceeded in the amount appropriated for the telephone communications. So again, $378.52 from data processing to telephone communications.
Any questions or discussion for Linda or Sandy? Okay, could I get a motion then to move $378.52 from data processing to telecommunications?
So moved.
Second.
And a roll call vote then. Cheryl?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Michael Bennett?
Yes.
Michael Bryan?
Yes.
Drew?
Yes.
And myself is a yes. Motion carries. Thanks, Linda.
You're welcome. The next one is for $4,000 from the water supply electricity account to water retirement. The reason that they're needed in retirement is because the assessment for Plymouth County retirement as a whole went up, and originally they had projected, the water department had projected that it would be $15,907. When they get the bill from the treasurer's office at the end of the year, it was more than they had realized it was going to be. So they're putting in the article for a September town meeting to increase what they voted this May, but they need to take care of this one that's already passed for fiscal 21. And then in September, they'll take care of the fiscal 22 adjustment. So again, 4,000 water supply electricity to water retirement.
Linda or Sandy, do we know whether this is this a consequence of like earlier unplanned retirements or return on investments on the
Right.
account?
So we have Plymouth County assesses us a certain amount every year. It went up a lot for FY21. It went up a lot again for FY22. They're trying to meet their fully funded goal. And by, what is it, Charlie, by
33.
30, I believe it's 2030.
Yeah, 2030. So in order to do that, they've increased everyone's assessments. And what happens is last year, water's amount that they had to pay at the end of the year was only $15,900. This year it was up over, I think it was 21,000. It went up quite a bit.
Yep.
And then when I saw this, we realized we did not increase it for the for FY22 either. So that's why we are going to be asking for an article on the special town meeting. But this is just to take care of this year's, and it's really just Plymouth County assessment.
So we should anticipate some more of these in the article.
Yeah. Whenever the retirement number goes up for the general, we have to remember to increase it for water as well.
Right, it's just the water department reimbursing the town, so there won't be other departments because they're already done in the assessment, but the water department reimburses the town for it.
Right.
Got it. Any other questions, folks? Okay, could I get a motion then to transfer $4,000 from water supply electricity to the water department's retirement fund?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, a roll call vote then. Cheryl,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Michael Bennett,
Yes.
Michael Bryan,
Yes.
Drew,
Yes.
and myself is a yes. Motion carries. Thank you. Do you have any others?
That wraps up all the line item transfers. If you want to
Okay.
do one other quick housekeeping before you talk with Mark Bobrowski, you do have the bill that was in the correspondence for the actual Finance Committee members to pay dues to the Association of Town Finance Committees. If you want to make a motion to accept that bill of $180, I can put it through, so you'll all be members again.
Or could I ask for a motion to pay our dues to the Association of Town Meetings?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, a roll call vote. Cheryl,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Michael Bennett,
Yes.
Michael Bryan,
Yes.
Drew,
Yes.
and myself is a yes. Thanks, Linda. Okay, we are just a couple minutes early for Attorney Bobrowski. Is he on yet? I can't see. There's a number of people on. I can't see whether he's here.
He's just coming in. He's just arriving. There he is. Hi, Mark. Judy, hello.
Judy, there's Judy. It's Mark. Oh, there's Mark. Hey, Mark, you're on mute.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I think this is mainly a progress review and update for us. So I think without further, I'll just turn it over to you, Mark.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. So what I'm going to go through tonight with you is probably the least important section, one of them, section 1, which is sort of like the introduction to the bylaw. I call it the handshake of the bylaw. It's got a few things that are important, but it's just generally a greeting. Section 5 is a complicated topic that talks about non-conforming uses and structures. And section 10 is virtually everybody's job description. Do we before I begin, do we have any planning board or ZBA members or building commissioner with us this evening?
I do not think so.
I do not believe so.
18 participants.
Looking through them, I don't see members
No.
of those boards represented.
Okay. Well, they'll be sorry because it's interesting stuff. All right, so section 1. Have you all got copies of the files that I sent around?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so section 1 is very straightforward. I've gathered together those provisions that belong. You had them sort of scattered throughout your zoning, and I've culled the zoning and pulled them together into one piece here. So the first section is just a general introduction of purpose. The thing I like to see is a sort of a general statement that references, most importantly, section 2A, and that's the provision that I went over with you last time. This does not appear in the statute book, section 2A. It's suggested purposes for which zoning can be used. And then most important, under 1.2, reference to the Home Rule Amendment. Zoning is and Massachusetts is a home rule state. So zoning is a thing that's limited only by the imagination of the town meeting. It's pretty true that when I look at some of the things that I've seen municipalities do, it's amazing that small towns like Chilmark have had the wherewithal to think of youth lots available for people under the age of 30 who've lived in town for 8 years who income qualify. Those lots can be substandard in terms of everybody else, but they're designed to promote kids living in the town where they grew up. And that's the home rule amendment in a nutshell. Scope, obviously, this is something that's going to apply to various uses of land and construction of buildings. Applicability, we want to make sure that everybody understands that no building structure or land will be put up where the building is not in compliance with the provisions of the bylaw. You had some stuff under 167.2 basic requirements. I think mine is a little bit more up to speed in terms of statement. I move amendments to the front, and amendments are always in accordance with Chapter 48, Section 5. And severability, those two things that are in black are your existing provisions from elsewhere in the bylaw. We don't need to say reconsideration of proposed changes because that's right out of the statute. And we've already said that all amendments will be in accordance with Chapter 48, Section 5. So that's, as I said, that's more or less the handshake of the bylaw. There's some other administrative provisions that are more or less scattered through the bylaw. For example, with regard to nonconformities, and I'll point that out in a second when we begin that. Any questions on Section 1? My computer just told me that Lenovo expects to do updates in 5 minutes. I have no idea why. This is one of those awful things that happens in life that you have no control over. Let me see if I can get your phone number off of the Zoom invitation. And if things go really south, I'll be on the phone 30 seconds after that.
I think Charlie issued a phone number.
I got it here. Let's hope for the best. I hate it when this happens. Okay, so over to Section 5. Should I put this up on the screen?
Let me make sure you can do it. Okay, we're good.
Okay, I've got to find it. So let me pull it up to my background material first here. So I rewrote this starting about 1990 when the courts had a series of cases that really made it a whole different ballgame. At the time, I was recodifying the bylaw in Sudbury, and I liked what they did, and I'll explain the pieces that have their origins in the Haverhill piece, the Sudbury piece in a second. Let me just call these two sections to the front here. Okay, I can share screens, Charlie?
Yes, you should be able to.
Okay, I should. Okay, so there we go. Okay, so this is where 75% of the people meet the bylaw, right? I mean, very few people are coming in and starting a business or start building a new home from scratch. Many of them are going to buy a lot or a house on a lot, which is substandard because zoning has a tendency to get bigger lots and more frontage as we go through history. I recall moving into Mansfield around 1991 or 2. They had just passed 4 or 5 years earlier a bylaw amendment that brought the lot size up to, I think it was 45,000 square feet. Within another few years, they'd gone to 60,000 square feet. And every lot that was not up to par became a non-conforming lot. And every house on those lots became a non-conforming structure. So that's where 75% of the people generally are going to pick up this thing and try to understand it. So let me walk you through what I have here. I've also put in your provision in strikeout. And I'm not going to suggest that yours is terrible, but I think mine covers it a whole lot better. So first of all, the basic rule for nonconformities is that you have to tolerate uses and structures as they were on the day they became nonconforming. The legislative history of the Zoning Act actually says that another choice would have been to tell them they couldn't do it anymore, but you'd have to buy it. And nobody thought that was a very good idea because there wasn't enough money then or now. So the basic rule is that if somebody's structure use becomes non-conforming, you must tolerate it as it was on the day it became non-conforming. After that, everything is elective. If you want to let them change it, if you want to let them expand it, alter it, enlarge it, then that's your choice as a town meeting. And of course, most towns do choose that because these things some of them don't belong where they are anymore, and you wish you could get rid of them. But the vast majority are either neutral or actually, in some cases, a benefit to the community. I recalled when I lived in Beverly many years ago when my daughter was quite young, there was a grocery store on the corner of the Dane Street Beach neighborhood where I lived, and it was completely non-conforming. It was a residence district, but I mean, the alternative was to load the toddler in the car and drive to North Beverly to the Stop and Shop. But instead, I could push her a block and a half in a stroller, have a nice walk with her, get what I needed. It was usually something simple, and go home. So it's an amenity to the community in some cases. But if you're going to
And it's lost.
Very well.
It's
Get thumbed out. We'll have to wait for him to call back in.
All right, so the general choice under 5.1 that towns make is that they allow some things by special permit or by finding.
Mark's
But
back.
what you allow is up to you, and it's totally it'll be upheld no matter what you do. But you have to list everything that you're going to allow. So this commencement of construction or operation is an important provision. It was amended I think it was 2016. Used to be 6 months. If the zoning bylaw is going to change, and you protect yourself by getting a building permit or a special permit in advance of the first appearance of the planning board ad, then you're not going to be non-conforming as long as you commence construction within a period of 12 months. If you don't, then you're a non-conformity again, and you're under this provision on non-conforming uses and structures. So the statute divides up non-conformities into three different parts: uses, structures, and single-family and two-family homes. I'll take them one at a time. The first section here is on non-conforming uses. And the idea here is that, again, we're going to list the things that can be done. So permissible changes would be change or substantial extension of the use. Those are words right out of the statute. And the second one is change from one non-conforming use to another, not substantially more detrimental non-conforming use. This is a very valuable tool in my experience to try to get rid of stuff that otherwise would require a variance to change. And you're not going to get there from here on an appeal if you use a variance. So I'll give you an example of number two. I have a client, I rezoned Norwood, I don't know, 15 years ago. And I have a client who has an office slash, it's actually an apartment slash storage building next to the hospital downtown. So a very important piece of property right across the street from the hospital. The apartments that he has and the storage units are both non-conforming uses, and the building itself is a non-conforming structure. It's too close to the rear lot line. So he wants to put in 12 market rate flats, and he wants to sell them. And it's a big improvement over what was there. In an 1890 building, you couldn't wire it. About the best thing you could possibly hope for was to knock it down. But how would you replace it when the lot is too small, the building was too close? This is a provision that allows you to change from one non-conforming use, in that case, apartments and 6 storage units, to another, not substantially more detrimental, but non-conforming use. The multifamily flats were not allowed at the ratio that he wanted to do. I've often joked with towns that if you could convince the ZBA that a missile silo was not substantially more detrimental, you could change a house to a missile silo. But I know that the ZBA has much more discretion than that. So this is a really important tool because it's, if you'll follow my logic, it's a use variance without a hardship test. That's basically what it boils down to, but it's limited in applicability. It only applies to really awful things that would get better if a new proposal was allowed by the zoning board of appeals. And I specifically put When a special permit is granted under this section, no use variance is required with regard to use or dimensional aspects of the application. So I actually got into an argument with one of the members of the Norwood board, even though I wrote this. He told me that it still needed a use variance, and in order to get rid of that notion, I've broadened this out a little bit to avoid the argument. So change or substantial extension of the use, that's well-worn path. There's 70 cases that talk about when the use is going to be changed or substantially extended. It's a 3-part test under case law, and if you trip any one of the 3 parts, then you're stuck with trying to get a special permit. The second one is purely elective. If this is a sushi menu, number 1 is, basic sushi, and number 2 is some sort of fancy maki roll, right? You don't have to choose it. I recommend highly that you do choose it because I think it's incredibly valuable it adds some flexibility to the process here. I'm trying to think of another example in which we did this. There's another example, but in order to change that building next to the Norwood Hospital, I needed other special permits, and I'll sort of point them out along the way. The next section is on non-conforming structures, and non-conforming structures, again, we're going to allow for this if it determines that the reconstruction, extension, structural change shall not be substantially more detrimental than the existing non-conforming structure to the neighborhood. So permissible changes, these have to be listed, reconstructed, extended, or structurally changed, right out of the statute. Not many people know about number 2, but it's right out of the statute too. If I've got a non-conforming structure and I'm going to alter it to provide for a substantially different purpose, or for the same purpose in a different manner, or to a greater extent, statute says I need a special permit. And a good example of that, I was on my planning board here in Concord 10 years ago. In Concord, we don't want banks and real estate offices downtown. We had an art gallery, and the art gallery disappeared, couldn't afford the rent anymore. The new tenant was announced as a Citibank. And they said, oh my God, there's nothing we can do to stop it. And I said, what are you talking about? Every building in downtown Concord is non-conforming because there are no side yards, and it's right on the sidewalk. So that's a non-conforming structure, and it was going to be altered to provide for a substantially different purpose. Art gallery going over to bank, special permit required. When we announced to Citibank that they were going to have to apply for a special permit, Citibank went away. Now that was a good thing because that's not what we wanted in downtown Concord. In other places, you might say, well, we really wanted the bank, in which case you give them the special permit. Okay, so the next provision here has to do with variances. And this is a codification of the holding in a Supreme Judicial Court case called Rockwood versus Snow Inn Corp. And the basic rule here is that except as provided for single and 2 family residential structures, if you're going to change a pre-existing non-conforming structure by reconstructing it, extending it, structurally changing it, and you're not going to create a new nonconformity, even if it's everything that you're doing is going to conform with zoning, you need a special permit. That's what the SJC said the statute means. If you're going to change it in such a way as to create a new nonconformity or increase an existing nonconformity, you have to get a variance. And that's the holding of the court in Rockwood versus Snow Inn. The only thing that hasn't yet been decided, to my knowledge, in case law is what happens if I have a structure that is in the side yard, and let's say it's 10 feet in a district that requires 20 feet, and I want to extend the wall right along that 10-foot line. I'm not going to get any closer. I'm not going to move further away. Do I need a variance or a special permit? Am I increasing the nonconformity, or am I not increasing the nonconformity because I'm still just 10 feet away? Half the people in the world are going to say, well, you're 10 feet away then, you're 10 feet away now, no problem. The other half are going to say that there was nothing there before and you're putting something 10 feet away. So you can pick here as to whether or not you want to make this done by a variance or a special permit. The model I've given you is variance, but that's not necessarily the correct answer. There is no answer. Non-conforming single and 2 family homes. Now the statute calls these structures out for special treatment, and that's because the courts have said they're entitled to be treated more liberally than an office building or a gasoline station. So years ago there was a case from Edgartown called Branford, and in that case The guy was moving a structure onto a lot, and the lot was too small. When it went to the ZBA, they said he needed a special permit. He appealed it and he went to court, and it was finally taken by the Supreme Judicial Court. There were two camps at the Supreme Judicial Court. Camp one was led by Justice Cordy. He said that if you're going to examine a non-conforming single or two-family structure, then the statute says does not increase the non-conforming nature of the structure. Justice Cordy read that to mean, why is the structure non-conforming today? Is what's changing going to make it worse? That's a pretty precise surgical approach to the problem. Justice Graney, who was also on the court at the time, said, I don't think so. I don't think you need to be that precise. I think if it's non-conforming today, you should sort of squint at what they want to do. And if it looks like it might get bigger, then it's going to change the non-conforming nature of the structure. So an objective test and a subjective test. 3-3, no answer. One judge recused herself, I think because she had a house in Edgartown. It came back about 2 years later in a case down your way called Bjorklund versus Norwell. And in that case, Cordy lost, big. Graney won. Graney's test basically put everything that was changing a non-conforming single or two-family home in front of the ZBA for a two-part analysis. Number one, does it increase the non-conforming nature of the structure? And number two, if so, should we give them a special permit anyway? When I was working in Sudbury, they said that the first part of the test, we don't need to be so elaborate because if you're going to the ZBA, the neighbors get notice and there's a public hearing. And what Sudbury did was they actually had 5 permissible changes. I've kept 3 because I don't like 2 of them. So these are what I call carve-outs. This is the first part of the test. Does it increase the non-conforming nature of the structure? Number one, the structure's in a lot that's too small, but the addition complies fully with side, rear, front setbacks, building coverage, and building height requirements. The assumption here is that if this guy came in front of you to fix up his house, and that was the case, you'd give him the special permit. So why not give him a building permit, right? Let's avoid the hearing. Let's just go straight to building permit, no public hearing. The second one's just about the same. The guy's got a house. The lot has deficient frontage. It's 100 feet of frontage and he's got 80, but his addition is going to comply with front, rear, side, setbacks, coverages, and building height requirements. You'd give him a building permit. And the third one, there's going to be encroachment to a structure, alteration to a structure, which is in one side yard, but the addition's in the other side yard. And it's going to comply with current setback yard, building coverage, and building height requirements in the area of the encroachment. In other words, you can't, if you're 10 feet from the side yard in the 20-foot district and you're going to go up on that wall, you got to come for a special permit. If you're not going to go up on that wall, then you don't need to come. You just get a building permit. So this gets the ZBA home at 9 o'clock in time to watch whatever's on at 9 o'clock. I don't know. And it means that the neighbors don't have to come out to the barricades. And it means that you don't have to have a special permit. And I'll bet if you look at the history of the ZBA and you take every case they've had for a non-conforming single-family house over the past 20 years, and you ran those 3 tests by it, then you would find that every one of those special permits would be granted. So it's largely a duplicative expert. The beauty of this is that I went to both Justice Graney, who was a friend, and Justice Cordy, who I taught with at New England Law, and I said, do you have any problem with this carve-out approach? And both of them said, great idea, go for it. That's perfect. So I've got the seal of approval from 2 SJC justices. Charlie, if you're doing the screen, if you go back up a couple of paragraphs, I want to show you one more thing.
One of the other members
Stop
is
right
doing
there. Stop right there. So you see this 100% here in the first paragraph of 5.5? All right, so even if I do, I qualify because I meet the carve-out, one of the carve-outs. If I'm going to more than double the house in gross floor area, my druthers would be to send the person for a special permit. In the Bjorklund case, the gentleman in question met in the permissible changes. He was building a house and he was going to qualify exactly as I've got in the permissible change section, except he was quintupling the size of the house. And at some point, that increases the non-conforming nature of the structure in my head, or at least it says to me that the neighbors should get a public hearing. So you have to not only meet 1, 2, and 3, but you can't increase the size of the house by more than 100%. You've got 50% in your thing now. Why 50%? I mean, I've seen a lot of great proposals. Put a second floor on a ranch. What's the problem? I mean, if they're staying under 35 feet, what's the problem? Okay, so moving down through this section, if we can stop at the next main one, abandonment or non-use. The statute says that if the structure's been abandoned or not used for 2 years, it loses its protected status, and it's basically subject to all of the provisions of the new bylaw. Understand that there is a difference between abandoned or not used for 2 years. Before 1976, the statute said only abandoned. There's only been one case I know of in history where a non-conforming use or structure has been abandoned, because abandoned is a subjective inquiry. If you put Mrs. Smith up on the witness stand and you say, Mrs. Smith, did you intend to abandon your non-conforming nursing home? And she says, no, well, that's the end of it. She didn't intend to abandon it. And in fact, that is the only case in which abandonment has been found. And that was a case in which Mrs. Smith returned the license for her nursing home voluntarily under no pressure from any regulatory agency. So the legislature added or not used for a period of 2 years in 1976. It's a lot more objective. You don't have to ask any questions. If you haven't used it, it's gone. Indicators of use would be things like connection to utilities, water, sewer, electricity. Also, marketing has also been argued in these cases, even though nobody's been in the house for 2 years. If it's still on the market and it's actively being listed by the multiple listing service, is that use? You argue those things out on a case-by-case basis. Here's what I learned in Holyoke, the last sentence. If I lose everything after 2 years, downtown Holyoke has been completely abandoned and it'll never be used again. I mean, they could pass something else. So I add a sentence there, provided, however, that by special permit, the Board of Appeals may reestablish a non-conforming use of structure, otherwise abandoned or not used, upon a finding that the reestablishment will not result in substantial detriment to the neighborhood. So you've had problems with insurance companies, or you have problems with probate, and the use is not used for a period of 2 years. No problem. You can go to the ZBA. You can ask for a special permit. You can bring it back. My favorite never will die building in Massachusetts is the old Sterling Inn. Judy, you remember the Sterling Inn?
Yes, I do.
Okay, well, That thing's had more people take a look at it in the 20 years since it went down in a kitchen fire than you can shake a stick. And I actually have brought it back to life a couple of times. I finally got Sterling to think about adopting this, because there are people who want to start a cooking school there, or they want to make it into a community center, which it once was. Why just throw it away?
Mark, one of the things we're dealing with in Halifax is we've, over the years, we've foreclosed on a number of properties.
Yep.
And so the use is obviously hasn't been used for the 2 years. I want to argue about the abandonment situation. And as you're pointing out, there's a question, I guess, right now under our current bylaw that whether someone could go back in now to it's a non-conforming use, but usually it's a single-family house on a substandard lot, and we're debating about what we're trying to do there in the sense of, are we going to let it lie fallow in essence of never say to people, you're never going to be able to develop that lot again, or are we going to go through maybe, as you mentioned, a special permit process? But I guess the question with the current bylaw is whether, in fact, there is any option right now, or is it to be able to do anything with these house lots that we foreclosed on, with or without houses, not with or without, with houses, do we have any other option besides changing the bylaw?
No, I mean, I'm looking at your bylaw. It says no non-conforming use which has been abandoned or discontinued for 2 years shall be reestablished. If the lot's too small, the next sentence is any future use shall be in conformity with the provisions of the chapter. So if the lot's too small, it's just an empty space.
So Mark, can I follow up on that?
Sure.
So if the use is available, if it's in the AR area, but the structure is non-conforming, can you reestablish the use?
Well,
Because
it really depends why the structure is non-conforming. If the lot, most people think that if your lot is too small, you have a non-conforming lot. The answer to that is wrong. If you have a structure on that lot, the deficiency in the lot size makes the structure non-conforming. So if I take that structure down, or if 2 years goes by and I don't use that structure, the lot's still deficient and I can't put anything there without a variance.
But if you could reuse that structure, can you establish the use of residence in that zone because it's zoned for resident?
Well, if the structure's gone over the 2-year limit for non-use, then now you've got a dead structure too. So I just did this in Maynard a month and a half ago. In fact, they just sent me the recordable copy of the decision. My client owns a lot with the old Digital Credit Union on it, 30,000 square foot building. And also on the lot, which is zoned industrial, is a very old single family home, vintage 1930s, abandoned and not used for 2 years. I actually went through it. I'm lucky I didn't fall through to the basement. It was in such bad shape. And it's been at least 10 years since it's been marketed, utilities connected, anything like that. So my client, and I rewrote Maynard zoning and put this provision in Maynard zoning. My client said, well, let's, take a flyer at it. They need housing in Maynard. Maybe they would be comfortable with establishing the non-conforming single family structure. And we went back and sure enough, they were okay with it. And we got the special permit and the appeal period just expired. Now it's 2 buildings on a lot. We couldn't divide the lot into 2 lots because there's not enough area. One of the reasons the structure was non-conforming before was because it was a second principal building on 1 lot. So we just created exclusive use areas under a condominium arrangement, and we didn't have to create a new lot and worry about anything else. The house is exactly in the location where it was before. All we did to it was add a garage. I mean, it's you have to build. Let me just make very, very clear that the legislature hasn't tinkered with this since 1975, right? And so my old friend Don Schmidt and I used to call ourselves the plumbers. This is the hand you've been dealt. They're not, if you think the legislature is ever going to rewrite the section on nonconformities in your lifetime, you're wrong, because they don't understand this either. So it's going to be like this forever. You have to build flexibility into it and take advantage of what you've got. And that's essentially what this is designed to do. The next section, 5.7, is similar in that I've tried to build some flexibility into things like tear down. I don't know if you're experiencing tear down at all, but where I live, I live in the Queen City of tear down. And there are plenty of houses in Concord that are on non-conforming lots. Many in my neck of the woods, West Concord, are 1,200 to 1,500 foot capes. And believe me, the market for that is not here in Concord anymore. People come in from Cambridge and the city and they buy one of these houses and they tear it down and they max out what they can do. So what can you do? How should you do this? So first of all, this is talking about voluntary demolition, not you had a fire and the building has to be torn down. These are people who are buying a house to tear it down. That house in Concord now goes for $650 to $750, the one you're going to buy to tear down, because the lots are that expensive. Once you do it, then you have to reconstruct within 3 years or start. Number 2, if you're putting it on the same footprint as the old building and in the same gross floor area, then you can do it as of right, but nobody's going to do that. And this doesn't just apply to houses. This applies to pizza parlors. It applies to gasoline stations. If you're going to move it off the footprint or increase the gross floor area, you need a special permit. And you get the special permit prior to demo so that we're not hearing a sob story at the end of the day. We actually did have a pizza parlor that burned down. A bus parked too close to it in a thunderstorm. The bus got hit by lightning. Pizza parlor caught on fire. And it took, 2 or 3 years for the insurance company to pay up. So they needed a special permit under number 5.6. And they also needed a special permit under 5.7 because they did not put it on the footprint and they did increase the GFA. And this is all special permits. So if you don't like what the proposal is, you can just say no. And don't ever let a lawyer tell you that a special permit has to be granted, because that's just a completely erroneous statement of the law. Under reversion to nonconformity, if you change it and it conforms, you can't go back. Under substandard lots, when I was on my planning board, many times we had people come in for land swaps. So party A wanted to give 2,000 square feet to party B, who was going to give 2,000 square feet to party A. And it was all about having side yards conform so that alterations could be made. Well, if the lots were substandard, if they were non-conforming and you changed the lot, remember, you have to tolerate things as they were on the day they became non-conforming. If you go changing as they were to something else because you're going to do a land swap with your neighbor, you've blown the whole thing up. You're only protected what you had on that day, not something different. So this is such a common thing that I've put in a provision that says, yeah, all right, if you're going to trade 2,000 feet for 2,000 feet and you're not making your lot any worse, then you can just do it. And it will not result in an increase of existing nonconformity or a new nonconformity. And then lastly, I've seen a couple of instances in which the government comes along and they take a piece of a lot. Sometimes it's just for a street widening at a corner. And now, again, you've changed the lot. It's no longer what it was on the day it became nonconforming. But if eminent domain accomplishes that, we're going to look the other way and call it nonconforming. So this is a standard thing. I'll bet at this point in time, 80 towns, 75 since 1990, 92, have some version of this. I keep modernizing as it goes along, as case law changes. And building commissioners are not calling me to tell me that they don't understand it and it's really a bomb. This is a simple approach to things that works. A lot of towns do, for example, increases in what am I trying to say? They do floor area ratio for increases to single family homes. You can only increase it to a certain floor area ratio. I find that to be too complicated. Either put it back the way it was or ask us for a special permit so that we can negotiate each and every aspect of what you want to put there. And that this is all the business of the Zoning Board of Appeals. It sounds hellacious, but it is. I mean, nonconformities have been called the black hole of the Zoning Act. I think that the appeals court has actually said that it's difficult and infelicitous. I didn't make that up. That's a quote. And it is. It's difficult and infelicitous. There aren't a whole lot of, unfortunately, a lot of this falls to the building commissioner. And when I speak once a year to the Southeastern Mass SEMBOA, it's called Southeastern Massachusetts Building Officials Association. It's always over in Raynham or Taunton, and I give a update on case law. And at the end of the case law discussion, I ask them if anybody has any questions, and they just ignore what I said, and they ask me 42 questions about Section 6, what we just covered, because this is the thing that's on their plate the most.
So Mark, I mean, the idea for all the proposed changes in general, what's the central theme? To be able to more easily allow, or so that the lots can be used, or some other purpose, in the sense of, I think, in general, I think we're, given the current language for Halifax, we're pretty rigid in not allowing changes in non-conforming uses, et cetera.
Yeah, I'm looking at your existing section. For example, alteration. The non-conforming structure may not be altered if the cost of the alteration exceeds 50%. That's like a FEMA rule for floodplain compliance. Mm-hmm. On extension or restoration, rather, a non-conforming building which has been damaged or destroyed may be repaired, but the restoration cost shall not exceed the original area by more than 50%. I'm more flexible than that.
Yeah, because
I'd like to entertain more ideas.
Yeah, I mean, given the cost of construction now, it's very easy to hit that 50% mark.
Yeah, and I'll bet some of the better ideas would exceed the 50% mark.
Yeah,
So why rule it out on an arbitrary basis at 50% when I could come in with a very good idea that would have you, lapping it up?
Yeah, Mark, what's the motivation for the 50% cap? Is that like an anti-gentrification thing? It seems like we're limiting people in investing in the quality of their property.
I agree with you completely. These are old rules. I've seen them in a lot of places. I've never liked them and I've never repeated them. I mean, I will put them back in if you tell me that's what you want. But I usually give you a hell of a fight before I do.
Makes sense. Okay, thanks.
Part of doing this in 100 cities and towns and practicing probably in 150 over the course of my career is that I see things. It's kind of fool me once, fool me twice. If I see it and I think it might work out, and then I learn from it that it really is a pain in the butt, I want to get rid of it. I want to improve it. I particularly like that section back in uses, non-conforming uses, that says I can change an existing non-conforming use to another less detrimental non-conforming use. Understand the words there. I'm not changing the non-conforming use to another conforming use that's less detrimental. I'm changing it to another use that's not listed as allowed as because it's better, right? So if I got the case emanates from Blasco versus Winchendon. In Blasco, there was a non-conforming gravel pit, and the applicant wanted to convert it to a non-conforming demo landfill. Think Central Artery comes to Winchendon. So what was better, a hole or a filled hole? They were both impermissible. Neither of them were allowed. The neighbors won the case by saying you don't list that as an eligible change. And the neighbors won on a procedural ground. The neighbors were fighting it because they didn't know what was in the leachate from the Central Artery to fill the landfill. But they won it on the procedural ground that it wasn't listed as something eligible. One of the plaintiffs was actually a student of mine at Boston College. That's how I learned the story of the case. But, having said that, if I'm changing a non-conforming awful thing, think of all the awful things that are on the side of the road in Eastern Massachusetts, and I can change that to something better, even if it's not listed by special permit. Okay, where do I sign up for that?
Mark, under voluntary demolition, you specify that construction has to happen within 3 years. Is that pretty standard, or do you see any towns put in an end date when construction has to be completed by?
No, I've seen end dates. I don't typically buy into that. I know that there are cases there's one in Cambridge where the guy's still building the house after 20 years. I think they finally pulled the building permit. The state building code says once you get a building permit, you have to commence construction within, I think it's 6 months, and complete expeditiously as possible. So there is a built-in measure in the code that's supposed to cover that kind of thing.
Hey, Tom?
You're muted. Tom, Gordon's trying to speak to you, but you're muted.
Hey, folks. Sorry.
Hey, Tom, where we have the zoning board meeting tonight, would it be possible to have Mark do the next section at the next meeting? Because we've got to run up to the zoning board to actually listen to that part.
Of course. Yeah, I think this is really useful stuff. Mark, is that okay with you? We meet again on the 28th?
I know 28th is
26th.
a horrible night for me. I've got a
26th, I'm sorry.
my calendar's on my kitchen counter. I'll be right back.
Okay. Sorry, Linda, 26th, right?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Thank you, Tom. I'm going to run up to the meeting.
Thanks, Gordon.
So while Mark is checking his calendar, I actually had a question for you folks too. I do related work to what Mark is doing, and I guess I'm wondering what we need to do to consult with or engage the planning board and the ZBA before this goes too far. Because I think you'd hate to get to the point where you have a draft bylaw and there's been no input from them. And I don't know how best to do that in your town, but typically they would be pretty involved in this.
Well,
So, my role on this is to kind of help Mark with community process. So I'm looking for some direction and guidance.
so Judy, go ahead, sorry.
This is Gordon Andrews, Sr. I'm the chairman of the planning board.
Oh, hi.
I haven't been able to make the other meetings you had. And we were looking for Mark to maybe bring us up to speed on the planning board. And maybe we could have the zoning board meet with us. Monday nights is a tough night. That's the problem for me. And, I'll bring it up. We have a meeting Thursday night.
Mm-hmm.
Gordon, this is actually our first draft review section, so the boards aren't too far behind. But I take your point. We should figure out how to get this in front of ZBA and planning as quickly as possible.
Right.
Gordon, would the best way for that to be for Mark to join that meeting?
I do have the 26th open. I don't have a meeting that night. The meeting that I did have canceled.
So we would cover section 10 then, and perhaps we invite. I hear you that Monday nights are tough for ZBA and planning, so maybe we've got to do it separately so that we have as broad an input as we can.
I do think that the
Get up there.
is this,
And you're trying to go for the 26th?
I could do that.
So, say that again, Gordon, you broke up.
You're going to try for the next meeting for the 26th?
That is the next scheduled finance committee meeting.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know whether Mark would be available to meet up with the planning board on Thursday night.
I have the 26th open. If the planning board can come, that's fine. I mean, generally speaking here, I'm working with one committee under contract, and if anybody else wants to join, God bless, no problem at all. I can't double, triple the number of meetings here under the contract. That's understood. Judy was asking for guidance when you were getting your calendar, Mark, on how to affect her role in this as, community participation. So I guess I'd throw that back to you and Judy. How best for us to do that, recognizing we can't double the number of meetings that you are attending, but it's important for ZBA and zoning to weigh in and for the public to weigh in. So Judy, how do you usually proceed with that? Are you circulating drafts, or we'll happily move our meeting to accommodate ZBA and planning on this, but how do you typically manage that?
Well, do you want to speak, Mark, or do you want me to address it?
Go ahead, Judy.
So typically what I would do, again, because my role is different from Mark's, I would probably meet either with the planning board, or I would ask the planning board if we could just interview some of the members, perhaps in a meeting that also might include a couple of people from the ZBA and the building inspector or whatever, and try to get their input on issues they have with the zoning bylaw. So that as this rewrite is going forward, we kind of know if there's something they're having a problem with or something they would really like to see changed, Mark gets the benefit of that input, but Mark isn't having to do all the meetings. So that would be an early step for me, typically, is to just meet with the people who are actually going to live with this if it's passed in whatever form. What concerns do they have dealing with the bylaw that they have now? We would typically meet with maybe some local developers or local builders or, engineers who often appear before your town boards and get their take on what's working or not. And then I can feed all of that to Mark and he can work his magic with it. But that would be, I guess, my suggestion. I could certainly make some interview time available remotely and, probably work through Charlie or something to get some meetings scheduled with folks from those other boards who might be available. We could do that.
Is this recorded meeting available?
This one tonight? I believe so.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It'll be on YouTube.
Well, it said it was recorded, so.
Okay.
So this is available, yeah.
So we can refer the boards to taking a look at that too.
So here's, I mean, in the sequence of things, here's, well, you should know that all of this stuff will be discussed again. Let me count, 14 times before we come anywhere close to the public hearing.
Right.
This is going to be in a first draft. When I walk you through the first draft, you're going to see it again. Some of the things I said tonight may seem great. They may seem undesirable. If there are things that you don't like about what I'm proposing, you need to tell me. I mean, for example, on section 5.2, under the nonconformities provisions, you don't need to pick number 2 for permissible uses. 5.2.1.2, change from one nonconforming use to another, not more detrimental nonconforming use. Some towns have chosen not to do that. It opens a door that the ZBA has to be careful with, because there are options there that don't exist otherwise for an applicant. I think it's good to hear those things. I remember when I did this in Winchester, the first proposal was to take a non-conforming office building and to make it into a non-conforming multifamily building. And they were so irked that the developer had the chutzpah to apply for that, they weren't even going to take the application. And I said, no, at least take it and deny it. And that's what they did at the end of the day. So, you know, if you're, and that's, you know, the first idea that came down the pike was not the one I would have hoped for. But I like to see flexible proposals. And if I think they're I just redrafted Haverhill's provisions, and the first applicant for flexible development, which is something that we'll talk about later, came in and he wanted 24 more units than he was otherwise entitled to. So I don't think he's going to get it. Bad first applicant. But that doesn't mean that the next one won't be a lot better.
Judy, back to your question. I think it's critical for you to engage with Gordon and with both ZBA and planning to get their input, and maybe to start with them. I know we're going to have more time here with more iterations on this, but as finance committee, we may be the coordinators of it. We're not the folks that are going to have to live with this and adjudicate it. So I think we need to make sure that we get as much input from them as possible.
Okay. Well, Mark and I can talk offline, and I'll then connect with Charlie and figure out a schedule to do some interviews with them.
Great.
Do you want to cover section 10 now?
No, actually, I mean, Charlie, what do you think? I mean, Gordon asked if we could meeting.
I mean, it sounds like at least some of the members or one or more members of the planning board would be able to attend the meeting on the 26th.
I can do that.
Well, maybe we should aim for that.
Great.
And I'm happy. I'm happy to have. Is anybody on here from the ZBA right now?
I don't believe so. No.
Okay. Like, if the ZBA wanted to do, you know, a 1 o'clock hour-long conference call or Zoom, section 5, they have to understand that. That's their job. And I always tell towns as I'm exiting that I'm more than happy to do a training session on special permits, variances, nonconformities, because those are the 3 things that really boards have to understand in order to do their job correctly. So,
well, what I can do, at least at this point, is for both for this meeting and the previous one, is get the YouTube links sent to the ZBA and planning board members. The ZBA right now is upstairs above my head. Their meeting started at 7. So they were prepping for tonight. So that's one of the reasons probably why we don't have anybody there from ZBA on this call.
well, this is something maybe Judy and I can coordinate and set up. Unfortunately, this is Zoom is great in that if you can stagger the meeting times at night, you can actually be statewide with 2 different meetings.
Yes.
So as I look at my calendar through the end of this month, it tends to die off in August. But I mean, I'm doubled up on a lot of nights right now. So
Yeah.
But the 26th.
Me too.
Yeah. If the ZBA is open, for a lunchtime meeting or something like that, or a late afternoon meeting. I'm meeting with the Medford City Council at 5:30 on Wednesday. They just find it easier to get it done then.
Yeah, I often do meetings at that time too, Mark, with town boards. It just works out.
It can
So
be
I'll go back on section 5 and make sure that I do have a special meeting with the ZBA in light of the fact that they couldn't be here tonight.
Okay.
Maybe Charlie, you can send me the contact info for the chairman and I'll go from there.
Well, that's a little bit in flux. I'll find out by the end of tonight, maybe who the new chair is.
Okay.
Okay.
So why don't we then, is the planning board going to be able to make it on the 26th?
Well, it sounded as if at least one member was going to, and you had a second member on the call earlier, who I think maybe is now upstairs at the ZBA.
Okay. Well, why don't we tentatively say that we'll do it on the 26th, subject to your confirmation, Charlie.
Okay, yeah.
And if you wanted to do it at 6:15 like we did tonight, that'd be great.
I think that would be the goal, yes.
Okay. And I'm more than happy to explain section 10 to the finance committee, although the finance committee doesn't play a role under section 10. But if you have other things to do, I understand.
If we can do that, you'll have a broader audience if we can do that on the 26th.
Okay.
What's the thing, though? Again, Charlie, you good with that? Okay. So why don't we do it on the 26th, and then we'll have a broader audience at that time, Mark.
Okay, that's fine with me.
And we'll get as many members as we can.
Great. And the meeting after this is one in which we take the use table and the definitions and I try to make them connect a little bit better. But more importantly, in the use table, I want you to be looking at the use table thinking, what century is this? Because a lot of things have changed dramatically in the last 5 years.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they're not going back.
So will we have that section in advance of the 26th? Should we try and cover them both then?
No, I think we do the 26th. I'll do section 10 and then we'll have another meeting in August and go from there.
Okay. All right. I think that's it for this evening then. Thank you both.
Okay. Thank you. I'm sorry about the technical difficulties.
No, you got through it.
Why did my computer decide to reboot in the middle of that? We all know the feeling.
Yes, exactly right.
All right. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Judy. All right. Let me put the agenda back up. So Charlie, does that moves us to wage and personnel discussions on water department requests, 6 and grade 7, and any others that may arise. Are we still on track to have that discussion this evening?
Tom, it looks like Charlie stepped out of the office for a minute, so we're waiting to see if he comes back. I believe that you, as the finance committee, have to vote to allow a representative, presumably Charlie, to sign the contract with Mark Bobrowski. So that was included in the paperwork I sent, was the actual contract, but they need a vote to approve that final contract and have someone sign it.
So could I get a motion to approve authorization for Charlie to act on our behalf in signing the contract with Attorney Bobrowski?
So moved.
Second.
And a roll call vote. Cheryl?
Yes.
Mike O'Brien?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Drew?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
And myself, Tom, is a yes, so that's approved.
Thank you.
Okay. Charlie,
Charlie's back on time.
That's right.
I'm dealing with logistics upstairs. They ran out of chairs and people didn't understand that we don't have a PA system up there. The mics are just there for the recording of the meeting for Area 58. There's no PA system per se up there. So we just had to tell people they have to speak loud. Sorry.
Well, in the interim, we voted, you're authorized to sign the contract with Attorney Bobrowski. So that got done in your absence. So we're on to wage and personnel as the next agenda item.
Right. And Gordon, the younger, the member of the Board of Selectmen, is upstairs right now. I know that Ashley's here right now. So, and the board and the wage and personnel, the specific thing on Bill Lindsay is also on the Selectmen's agenda. So you can all still take separate votes. We were trying to do one vote tonight, but we can make it work with a vote tonight and a vote tomorrow, if, depending on what people want to do.
I think otherwise we'd have to table this vote until the 26th, right? So.
Right. I don't see a reason to table the Bill Lindsay discussion and possible vote tonight.
No, that's what I agree. So we should move that one forward if we can, so that tomorrow Board of Selectmen can do it. Agreed? Right.
Oh, it is.
Okay. Who has
So does someone want to let him know exactly what's been asked for?
So we have Donnie Bosworth, who is on a phone line right now, I believe. Donnie, you're going to have to unmute yourself. *6 should work if you're on a phone. He's one of the commissioners from the water department.
There we go. There you are, Donnie.
Okay. Yeah, this is my first time, so I don't know that much about this stuff on the phone. So, okay. I'm here to represent, we got a new superintendent coming in, and we're trying, it's real tough out there getting somebody to come in and take over. It's the surrounding towns are paying real big money now. So we're trying to get him up to, I think, a 12B or step B. I'm not sure. I don't have the paperwork in front of me. I'm at home. But
it's 12A step 2.
Okay.
Grade 12A step 2.
Okay, yeah. We're trying to start him up there because we're trying to get him some incentive to stay. They're so, everybody's looking for people like that, and they've offered them big money and benefits. So we're just trying to get the approval to get them into that step 2 to keep them here.
Charlie, I'm curious if I could just ask a question, whether this rests on logic or tradition. In the sense that, I get what Donnie's representing. This competitive challenge is everybody's facing this in every town. And, are we worried more about precedent or about, kind of the competitive reality of what we need to run the water, the water department?
You may be looking at both in the sense that, in general, when we've brought somebody in for the proposed starting wage or salary level other than step 1, it's because they've done this type of work before. They're bringing in essence, somebody who isn't can walk in and do the job day one. Mm-hmm. So that if we're whereas on the other piece, and I'm not sure, and you have the resume, you'll have to make a judgment about that. It's not as if he's been a superintendent, for instance, in another community, but is his past experience as a water department employee in other communities sufficient so that you would say, yes, this guy isn't a complete rookie at this. We should bring him in at a step other than step 1. I think, though, the point's being made about the market problem. We ran into that actually when we were dealing with Keith when he was water superintendent, is that just a couple of years ago, the board, their town meeting ultimately made the decision to move that position to grade 12, because what we were finding was that we weren't paying enough, plus the responsibilities of the job itself. The additional federal and state requirements and mandates of running a water system with 3,000 households and businesses are sufficiently more difficult than they were 10 or 15 years ago. And new requirements are coming in every couple of years. So the job itself had changed, and we had to come in at a new grade 12. It's without the holiday pay. If you ever look at a wage and personnel table, this 12A was without the holiday pay, which was set up with when the police and fire chiefs were in grade 12. So I think you're looking at both questions to some extent. Technically, you need to be I think the idea was that we start someone at a step other than step one because they're not a complete rookie, and that and so I think it ties into, we want if we can get somebody in who can do the job, has experience, we're willing to pay that person a rate higher than step one so that we can, in fact, recruit qualified individuals.
Sure.
I mean, if they're running into difficulties about doing that, and I think they are, I think, both times, I don't think that whether when we were hiring Keith and when we were hiring Bill, that they were getting a whole boatload of candidates. So I think you measure both things. One of the things, though, I'm going to, the water department, water commissioners are also asking, which I don't think the finance committee and the board of selectmen can grant, because there's no variance allowed in the bylaw for this, is to have them start accruing at 3 weeks of vacation a year rather than 2. Normally somebody comes in, they start off working for the town, they're going to accrue at the vacation at the rate of 80 hours per year. I think it's like 6 2/3 hours per month. And then that's true for 5 years. But what the water department has asked is that he start accruing at 120 hours per year, which is normally what you would get when you've been here for 5 years. Unlike the step system, where there's specific language in the wage and personnel bylaw that allows the finance committee and the board of selectmen to jointly say, yes, we will start this particular person at this particular job at a step other than step one. There's no variance granted for that in the bylaw. Okay. I'm not sure if this is a worthy option to look at, but I know that the water department was asking that Bill come in at step 2. I looked at the numbers for a minute before the finance committee began tonight, and if you brought it, and it's although convoluted, and maybe Bill would want to do this, maybe they wouldn't, or the water department, for instance, also, but Bill could come in at step 3, still accrue at 80 hours per year, but the water commissioners would say to him, fine, you want to take a week off without pay? That's fine. You'll have a 3rd week, in essence, of vacation. And what happens is he's not going to get paid for that week that he takes off. So what will happen is the equivalent of 51 weeks a year at step 3 is equal to 52 weeks a year at step 2. So it's a kludge. And technically the water department could grant a week's vacation without pay. There's nothing in the bylaw that says they can't. I just don't know if it would make everybody happy that we, both raised his pay, got him that 3rd week of vacation, even though it's unpaid. But so that's up, but that's the only way I could see legally under the bylaw of being able to pull both things off. You certainly can move him to step 2 and say, sorry, we can't do anything for you for vacation. Or you can move him to step 3 and say, if you're interested, we can set it up so that, the water commissioners say, fine, go away for a week, that's fine. But I couldn't think of anything else off the bat that would satisfy both situations.
Andy's shaking her head. I want to hear what was causing that.
Yeah.
Very creative. It's very creative. I mean, being able to meet This guy is not a rookie. His resume is strong. Sandy, what were you thinking?
Well, I'm a little uncomfortable with taking the week off without pay. That may set a precedent. I mean, would be paying someone like a full salary for a week less. But I don't know how that falls within the Fair Labor Standard Act, how that would fall into it. But
he's not
splitting up my salaries when I have to do the accounting end of it, it becomes a little tricky.
Sure.
So, but I know that the vacation, we don't really have a way of giving any more time on vacation. That's just not in the bylaw to allow that. Maybe that's something that needs to be looked at for the future, is that if we have a candidate who's coming in with a lot of experience, a lot of years in, and we want to allow that, that would be something to look at. That's basically, and truthfully, the whole idea with the pay, I think, again, it's really important that both the selectmen and the finance committee get together and really look at that pay scale and see if we can bring it into something that's competitive, so we're not doing this step jumping all the time. So that's all I had to say.
Just
yeah, go ahead, John.
no, I mean, I think Charlie answered this, but just so I'm clear, so we do have a precedent for bringing someone up a step based on qualifications and some of the other factors that Donnie had
Yes,
mentioned.
we do.
The environment out there. Yeah, I think I would probably fall on what Sandra had said too, where, I definitely sounds like a qualified candidate, and, we have a need, and the demand is what it is. Bringing it up to that step 2, I think I would be slightly uncomfortable trying to do the step 3 I understand how the math works. Like Tom said, it's creative, but that, might be a little bit of, might get murky. I could see down the road as well too. So I think that's where I would kind of lean on it.
All right, great. Other comments from the rest of the committee?
Yeah, I agree with John. I think 2 would be a good place to start.
Yeah, I agree
Cheryl,
also. I agree too with the 2. And as far as the vacation, if there's nothing in the bylaws.
Yeah, I would agree. I'm inclined to, as much as I love the creativity, I'm inclined to stick with what the bylaws say. We'd be acting in good faith in this case, but then we've set a precedent.
Exactly.
Be used in the wrong way later. Could I mean, based on the comments that I've heard, could I ask for a motion to approve the increase to grade 12 step 2 rather than grade 12 step 1, but to keep the vacation entitlement where it is per the bylaws?
Second. Yeah, I make that motion.
I'll say.
I have a second. Thank you, Mike.
Yeah.
Okay, a roll call vote then. Mike O'Brien?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Cheryl?
Yes.
Drew?
Yes.
Sean?
Yes.
And myself is a yes, so that would carry.
Okay.
Thank you, Donnie.
All right. Thank you very much. I will talk. All right. Thanks.
All right.
I don't know, how do I shut this off now? Well, I'm telling you, this is my first one, so you guys just witness this. All right.
Hold down the power button.
You're welcome to stay, but it looks like you'll have to be quiet for the rest if you don't.
Oh, I'll leave. See ya.
Control Q if you're on a computer. Hang up if you're there. We go.
You found
You
it.
did.
Very good. Other wage and personnel matters that we need to cover tonight?
Well, you all mentioned the hanging the stuff we didn't get done, which I have informed the board of selectmen about that with the intent that you would like to make some progress between this meeting, 26th, and August 30th. I think the board, she's here, so she can speak for the board directly, but I think the board would agree with that assessment to try and get those things knocked out before the fall comes in. At least make progress.
You broke up a little bit, Charlie. So the board agreed that we should try and make progress on those? Or?
I think I haven't spoken, to the board as the board, but I think, they would be interested in doing that. I don't think that they want to leave a lot of things hanging into the fall. And the summer's actually a good time to see if we can make some progress in that, because one hopes there are fewer things coming up that we'd have to worry about during the next month and a half.
So do I have go ahead, Linda, sorry.
I was just going to say, so originally when this came up about doing the summer, I don't know exactly how you all feel now, but it was Fred who had, the previous chair, who had originally approached this. And I know the things that, obviously the water thing just came up now, that was after Fred, but he had specifically said about like the grade 6 and 7 situation that kept coming up over and over again, and looking at the pay scale. And he was looking to schedule these meetings to see if Charlie was bringing new information on that. So I don't know if Charlie's got stuff on that or not gotten stuff on that, and if there's other issues.
I mean, I have to work on the 6 and 7 issue. I have the information from other communities. I have to compile that and put analysis together for you. But my hope is, well, we'll see. This week and next week are going to be difficult, given my meeting schedule and days off schedule. So we'll see what I can get done before the 26th.
Charlie, do you have data? I mean, this is what I do for work. Do you have data that just needs to get shaped up? Because I could,
I'm happy to
formatting if you want. And as long as we had something to kind of bounce off the committee, I'd be happy to help get it organized, because I know how time consuming that is.
I'll get it to you.
Okay. And I'll promise to look at my email before the Sunday before the meeting. So thank you. I keep forgetting this email box. Okay, so why don't we table those and we'll try and make progress on that on the 26th?
Okay. Sounds good.
So can we just ask, Ashley's on right now. Ashley, do you think that you would be able to make the meeting on the 26th to discuss some of the wage and personnel items?
Yes, I will be there.
All right, great. And we'll try to get one or two of the other selectmen on too. I think it would be helpful for wage and personnel issues to be discussed with all the members of the finance and selectmen together, since they're supposed to be working together on wage and personnel. It's easier than doing it in 2 meetings, just because you can bounce ideas off each other.
Sure.
So I think it would work better that way. And I've done a pay scale analysis. I'm going to see if I can pull it up, and just maybe I'll try to get that out to everyone too, so that you can see the different steps, the percentages between steps, the percentages between grades. It looks a little colorful, really, but it gives you an idea of how the grades, some of them are sort of overlapping, and whether we're actually being competitive on, some of them. And there's been a lot of fooling around with the pay scale, and then we started expanding things by percentages, and when you do that, you're actually like blowing things out of proportion. I would rather see, and I know this is just me, but I believe jobs should be like a high and a low, and then we make even steps in between. When you start doing it by percentage, you start getting it out of proportion. And keep increasing things just by percentage. So, all right. So I'll try to do that.
So are you going to show that to us tonight, or are you going to send it around?
I will send it to you. I don't have it at the tip of my fingers, so I will get that, and I will get it out to you.
Got it.
All right.
Through this chair, may I, through the chairman, make a comment, Tom?
Yeah, of course.
So
with this discussion that's coming up, should the department heads submit updated job descriptions? Because one of the issues has been that, like you guys mentioned before, with the water superintendent and all that, and requirements from the state and from the federal government on some duties of police employees, their job descriptions have changed. For example, my administrative assistant is literally doing 3 different job descriptions. So I don't know if we're going to get into that discussion on the next meeting. If updated job descriptions would be valuable to the to the boards, because just so we can make a educated decision on all these step increases and pay grades.
Charlie, I mean, again, I fall back on, updating job descriptions is it's a task, and there's job spec drifts all the time. But Chief Chavez raises a great point. I don't know the last time, how obsolete are our current job descriptions, and should that be part of this exercise?
Well, I would do it after all this. The reason is that what we're looking at now is not so much the job descriptions, but simply the data that I have is simply pay rates. Trying to compare pay rates, however they're describing the job. I mean, it goes, you could always go back. We tried this, obviously, 4 or 5 years ago. We, reviewed the job descriptions, tried to do a new grade and step system. That did not work out very well. But so it's a little bit of a simpler task to say, okay, what is everybody paying the administrative assistant in the police department? What's everybody paying for, and saying, look, the job duties in each department might be a little bit different, if we're looking at Hanson, or if we're looking at Berkeley, or we're looking at Dayton, than they are in Halifax, but they can't be monumentally different. So at least that gives us an idea of, are we that far out, or are we right in that bundle with other communities, to say, forget about points and everything else. Let's just look at the pay scales in the other communities and see where we are and whether we're competitive for these positions for the grade 6s and 7s versus other communities.
So what I'm hearing is, first we tackle structure and market pricing, and then the 2 things that are left are substantial changes in job duties, either in the water department's case, which is because they're being sort of imposed, or it's a job design issue, which sounds like what Chief Chavez might be dealing with, because he just has to keep piling on different duties and things. But structure and market pricing first, which is what we should tackle now.
Yeah, because once you go down that rabbit hole of job descriptions and rating positions, it's a very difficult hole to get out of.
It's a creative writing exercise that you may never leave from.
I'd rather, at least we got the data for the first part. Let's get that done, see where we are.
Okay. And that's how we'll go. So we won't need new job descriptions right now. What we do want to see are the benchmark jobs and the pay scales, Sandy, that you've constructed.
Okay.
Good. So I think that's it for this evening on wage and personnel matters, I think. But we will take them up again on the 26th based on the data that Sandy sends out. I don't think we have it. So that's just the structural issue around grade 6 and 7 right now. We don't have any incidental or case requests like we had for the water department, correct? No specific individuals.
Not at this point. Right, Charlie? No, we don't have anyone else. Not currently, yeah.
That usually would come up in once a year in like the January, preparing for the May town meeting or whatever the case is.
Right.
All right. And moving on, Linda, do we have any correspondence?
The only other correspondence that you had outside of the zoning things and the contract for Mark Bobrowski, I believe, was just the notice that came through from Silver Lake discussing the assessment amount, which you knew, and we didn't meet the assessment back in when it was voted in May, but it was voted by the other two towns. So they just kind of sent the correspondence as they have to the chair of the finance committee saying that they, what the assessment was and what we'll be paying.
So it's just advice. There's no action.
Yeah, there's not really anything you can do about it.
Right. Just
letting you know.
Yeah. Okay. Any other comments from the public? Looks like most of the public has left, but. All right. Any other business?
Nope.
And could we entertain a motion to adjourn at 7:45?
I have a question first.
Okay.
Are we going to continue? Are we going to? I have a question. Are we going to continue with Zoom, or are we eventually going to meet?
Great point. I'm good with whatever the group just is comfortable with. It's too bad that we can't do a hybrid. I know this is too difficult to set that up. I think for work schedules, the vibe that I got the last time that we sort of discussed this was that this was easier for people now that it is still allowed. But maybe let's just go around and get everyone's kind of what works. Cheryl, you first. Since you raised the question, what's your view on what we should be doing?
My opinion, I find it easier if we were all together, meeting and discussing things. I just find it easier.
I think for public participation, sometimes it's easier for people to join, and to get others in the room. But I agree with you, and maybe we're going to go to some sort of alternating schedule or something. But Mike O'Brien, what's your view?
I'm indifferent either way, either format.
John?
I agree with Cheryl. I think the in-person meetings are more effective, but I also have benefited from the convenience of the Zoom. Maybe next week, since Mark's going to be on, or not the 26th, if Mark's going to be on anyways, maybe that would lean itself more to Zoom anyways, just with Mark joining us, and we could maybe give it a thought if we want to, how we want to move forward after that. But I agree there's a benefit to in-person when discussing.
Mike Bennett, what do you think?
I can go either way, but I think in person is always nice.
Drew?
I think either option is okay.
Okay. Why don't I propose this then? Why don't we do the 26th via Zoom, because we've got Mike and Judy joining, so it seems to make sense just to have that one done, and then we'll look at the next few meetings, the rest of the summer meetings on the calendar, and decide. I'm also indifferent. We can do it either way. And then the other thing that maybe I'd ask everybody to think about for next time, because I know like Joe has trouble getting there for 6. I noticed that on our website, we used to have these meetings at 7 when it was in person. So maybe if we could just think about whether, I think 7 would be easier for everyone to make usually because of commutes and all of that stuff. Maybe just at the next meeting, we'll set some in-person meetings, and we'll develop a view on whether it should be at 6 or 7. And we'll do that for the rest of the summer and going forward.
Okay, sounds good.
And Charlie, was there an option? It could be a bit of a hybrid if some.
We can try. We don't have. I mean, we'll have probably the best way, given the committee, would be, I know this sounds weird, we all gather around a computer screen so Mark can see you all, and you all can see Mark, for instance, if we were doing, if we were doing a hybrid, or if we were doing with anybody else. At some point, one of the things on the agenda for tomorrow, in fact, is for the selectmen to talk about buying some permanent, not permanent as in permanent location, but permanent as in we're actually buying stuff to do hybrid meetings, because I think a lot of communities are realizing that for many people, whether it's because they have families or because of their work schedule or because they have disabilities, there are any number of reasons why people can't make it to a meeting physically, but they can make it to a meeting remotely. And so a lot of, many communities are seeing a lot more participation from the public, having, whether it's a pure Zoom meeting or a hybrid meeting. But to do it properly, you need better equipment. We need a big screen, we need a projector, we need ways so people can communicate with each other, whether they're sitting in the room or whether they're online. And so the selectmen are going to talk about that tomorrow.
All right, great, thanks.
I volunteer my CTO because we do it in the office and it was cheap. So if anybody needs technical help, I'm sure others have got points we got too, but I think we can do it pretty inexpensively. But I think a hybrid would work, just as John says, just so that others non-members, people can join and listen in who want to. We'll get a lot more participation. So full remote for the 26th, but then we anticipate we'll move back to in person after that. Okay. All right. Okay. Any other business? Thank you, Cheryl, for bringing it up. I meant to and forgot about it completely.
Okay.
Anything else? Okay. Could I get a motion to adjourn at 7:51?
So
motion to adjourn.
Okay, roll call vote. Mike O'Brien?
Yes.
Mike Bennett?
Yes.
Cheryl?
Yes.
Drew?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
And myself is a yes. Thank you very much, everyone. Linda, thank you as always for organizing this. Charlie and Sandy as well. Thanks very much.
Before everybody gets off, if you can just remember to sign those line items and send them to me, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all. Good night.
Absolutely. Make sure you come in and sign. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Hey, folks.